did you want to be when you grew up? What did you dream of being when you were all grown up? Actually, a recent study asked this question to a certain age range, so I want to share it with you and see if you resonate with maybe your childhood dreams or maybe your current career goals even. Ages 3 to 5 were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Doctor, firefighter, police officer, teacher, astronaut, a princess, a superhero, work at a zoo or be a vet. And then we got a little older, and 6 to 8-year-olds said they added athlete, not so much a princess or a superhero anymore, but now they also want to be a singer, a dancer, a scientist, an artist. Then 9 to 11-year-olds said they wanted to be a lawyer or an engineer. Side note, if you're 9 to 11 years old and you already know you want to be a lawyer or an engineer, you should do that. That's good. At this point in life, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I'd also never been to the ocean at this point in life. Ages 12 to 14-year-olds said not many of them wanted to be zookeepers or vets necessarily anymore, and some of them no longer wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter, but now they're thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur. Then you get into high school, and we keep most of that list, doctor, lawyer, engineer, athlete, scientist, teacher, and now we've added, I want to be a CEO, I want to climb the ladder, I want to own the company. At that point in my life, I was in full music singer mode. But what I found funny regarding this study is that it stopped at the end of high school, almost as if we stopped asking that question when we graduate high school, which made me confused because I'm still asking myself what I want to be when I grow up. Last week, Buck shared that if it's true that God is real, and if God is real, then we were created intentionally. We were created on purpose for purpose. And just that reality alone should have huge implications in our lives and how we see ourselves and how we see others. So this morning, we're going to kind of unpack that a little more. We're going to continue our conversation asking, so then why? Then why? If we were created, and that is true, then why? For what? If we were created on purpose, for what? How do we know that we're on purpose? How do we know that we're on the right path? This morning's conversation is going to be about that on part of our conversation. For 6 or 7 years, a while back, Sal and I led a ministry in our last church. It was called the 20-somethings. And we were a suburban church, so 20-somethings meant some of them were in college, some of them were out of school, some of them had gone right into careers or trades, some of them were married, some of them were single, some of them had kids, some of them did not. It was all over the place where we were. But one thing that was totally the common denominator with all of our 20-somethings is they were having questions and having conversations around their purpose. They were asking, how do I know what my purpose is? How do I know I'm on the right path? How do I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? How do I know what to do with my life? And for many of them, the question was, how do I know what God wants me to do with my life? In fact, I remember this one girl in our 20-somethings ministry. She had just graduated college, and she was stressing because work wasn't necessarily like lining right up, and she was confused, and she didn't know what to do, how to use her major, and she was like having a lot of anxiety around her purpose. And we would have all these conversations around what's next in her life. And so she decided that she was going to go to a conference. And that was a conference literally just for young adults. Thousands of young adults gathered. It's called Passion. And at this point, they were meeting in Atlanta. So she drove to Atlanta to be with thousands of other 20-somethings who were asking themselves the same questions. And she was so excited because two of her favorite Christian authors and speakers were leading breakout sessions at this conference. And wouldn't you know, the breakout session was how to find your purpose. So she was ready because she was going to get the answer. She went to the first session, and this guy, the speaker that she just loved and read all of his books, he said, here's how you find your purpose. God has a plan for you. And this person said it is a wildly specific plan. In fact, this guy said, hey, if you're going down the highway of life, God not only says to you, I want you to go northbound or southbound, but God says, I know what exit I want you to get off of. I know the next turn I want you to take off the exit, and the next turn, and the next turn. And he told her that this is God's plan for you. So she kind of heard that, and then she went to the next session. Again, another one of her favorite authors and speakers. And this woman was saying the same thing, actually said the same analogy, but in a very different way. She said, God doesn't really, he might nudge you to go north or south. He might kind of care about that, but really he doesn't care what exit you take or what turn you take. She came back more confused than ever. And I don't think she's the only one looking for clarity in her life. I don't think we stop asking the question, what am I supposed to be doing when we get out of our 20s? Probably not out of our 30s, 40s, and beyond. In fact, when surveyed, Americans, 21% of them say they think about what's my purpose or what's my meaning daily. Another 21% say they think about it weekly. 29% say they think about it at least once a month. And about 6% say they consider it at least once a year. Now, there's also 23% of people that say they never ask this question. This is just not on their mind. Now, I just want to say, and I feel like I say this every time I share, like I do think that God uniquely made us, which means we will not all approach this conversation the same way, right? I do think we are created and we are uniquely designed, and not everybody, not every personality engages a purpose conversation the same way. In fact, I know this because I'm married to someone who engages this conversation very differently than me. My husband, Sal, and I have very different personalities. If you've been here for a while, that's probably pretty known from how I share. But, so I live in a perpetual state of what's next. It's never good enough in my life. So it's always what's next, what's the next big thing, what's the next goal, what's the next shift. I always want to change it. It's got to be better. It's got to go here. I got to find this thing over here. And what am I supposed to be doing, God? What am I supposed to be doing? And Sal is different than that. He just is naturally, by his temperament, just very a present person. And our launch into college and our 20-somethings went decidedly different. While I was stressing about which school to go to, what major, and all that kind of stuff, Sal was sitting in his guidance counselor's office having a very different conversation. He was going to be the first person in his family to attend college. He went into his guidance counselor's office and he said, I want to go to school. And she goes, okay, great. Where do you want to go? He goes, I don't know. Well, okay, what do you want to study? I don't know. Okay, so she pulled up his scores and grades and stuff and said, well, you look pretty good, your math scores are pretty solid. So, you ever thought about accounting? Okay, sure. She goes, well, I know of this really great school in Boston where they have a great accounting program. You could go there. Okay, sure. Guys, he literally went to that school and got that degree. That is insane. But I actually think 20-something Sal was onto something. I think there's something to this conversation that most of us overcomplicate. And we miss what God might actually be trying to say to us about our purpose because we have some misconceptions and we don't just keep it simple. Now, this morning, I want to have our conversation basically just through one chapter of the Old Testament. I want to spend our entire time looking at Jeremiah 29. Now, Jeremiah is a writer and a religious leader in ancient Israel in the late 7th century, early 6th century, and he is writing and giving speeches warning, for 5 decades, he's warning Israel of all these impending struggles, of all these things that God is trying to tell them. Jeremiah is really trying to drill home to them. Now, you're probably familiar with one particular verse in Jeremiah 29. I would say it is the purpose verse. We put it on mugs. We go to Hobby Lobby and we put it on our walls. We put it on every graduation card. You're probably familiar with Jeremiah 29:11. You've probably heard, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. And I think you're probably also familiar with the question of, okay, God, then what's the plan? What is this plan? If you've got one, can you show it to me? Now, I love plans, and I had a plan when I was younger. It was a very specific plan, and everybody was on board with my plan. Everybody was with me. My parents were with me. My friends were with me. Everybody knew this was my plan. Now, if you were here for Easter services and you attended the Saturday night set of services that we had here, it was probably a little weird for you, because I was singing. And I think most of you didn't know what to do with that. And it confused you. And so, it sparked some really great conversations because back in the day, music was my plan. And so, but I got to tell you, the best conversation I had from that whole experience, several of you came up and asked questions. You were like, I'm confused. We kind of worked that out. You calmed down. That was good. But there was this one guy that came to me a couple weeks later. And this guy is trying not to stereotype, but you look at him, he's significantly taller than me, much more muscular than me. I know that's shocking, but he's just he's like a big guy. You look at him and you're like, he drives a truck. And he ate a steak last night while he watched the UFC fight. And he probably got that steak on a hunting trip. Like, it's just like that kind of guy. And you look at him, and so he comes up to me a couple weeks after Easter, and he says, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I need to talk to you about something. I got to confess something. It's not really that odd in my line of work. So we step to the side, and I'm looking up at him, and he's like, well, when you sang Easter, he's like, I just want you to know something. I love musicals. It's like, I really, really like them. And I was like, okay. So I thought, this is a joke. I looked around for the camera. And I said, well, which musical do you love? He's like, Fiddler on the Roof, like without hesitation. And he said, what I would really like to see happen is I would like, knowing that you sing, he's like, I would like for you to deliver like a Sunday morning conversation like a musical. So, no, it's never going to happen. That is never in a million years going to happen. But I love that he loved musicals. I love musicals too, and I will tell you, music was such a big part of my story. In middle school, I started to explore music. I actually wanted to be a classically trained singer back then, learned to sing in several different languages. That was my plan. I pictured myself in 8th grade, I pictured myself singing at the Met in Manhattan, like that's what I wanted to do. I would go forward a little bit in life, and in high school, my genre preferences changed, did a few commercials, did a little bit of stuff, left high school early to pursue a career in country music, because I was in Nashville, why not? And then when that adventure was over, I moved to Boston to attend a school in Boston to study jazz. Music was my plan. Specifically, singing was my plan. And I had the plan. And then, in college, I got married. I became a Christian in college as well, but music was still the plan. We moved back to Nashville because music was the plan. So we come back, and I'm about a year in from moving, and I'm also volunteering at my church's student ministry. And about a year of volunteering, the student ministry director at the time decided he's going to change careers, and he thought I should apply for his job. To which I said, thank you, but no, that is not the plan. And he said, just please think about it. Please pray about it. Sure. So I talked to God and explained to God that was not the plan. I updated him on what the plan should be. I explained to him that, this is not the plan because look at all I've done. Look at what I've worked for. I went to school for this. Aren't you supposed to do the thing that you do? You get your degree. You're supposed to have that kind of career, right? Several of you know how that goes. I had the plan. So one night I was driving to work at the volunteer at the student ministry, and I was running late, and I was arguing with God on my way there. And as I walked into the auditorium, I was grabbing the door to open it up. And literally, the moment that I opened the door, the speaker is talking about Moses' conversation with God, where Moses is arguing with God about a plan. And as soon as I opened the door, I told God, God, this is the reason you gave me a voice to begin with. This is the whole point of my existence. This is the plan. And as soon as I opened the door, it was when God responded to Moses, and the speaker read, "Who made man's mouth?" I was like, okay, that's fair. And I felt like God just asked me a question. What if the only reason I gave you the ability to carry a tune is so that you could sing your future babies to sleep? Why would that not be enough? But that was hard for me for lots of reasons. But one of them is, I think, not an uncommon thing. I think sometimes we get fixed on our purpose and we think it's got to be one thing. It's got to be the thing we went to school for, or it's got to be the thing that I did really well in high school. It's got to be this one thing. It's singular. It's fixed. And if something varies or the path gets off, it means that I messed something up or I missed the purpose. Or if I haven't found my purpose yet, I'm looking for that treasure map. Our purpose is not singular and fixed. It ebbs and flows. It changes throughout our life with different seasons. Things change all the time, and you kind of know this, but you forget it. When my youngest son was trying to figure out where to go to school and what to major in, he was really stressing about which school to pick. We had to tell him there are more than 2 schools, not just A&M or UT. There are other schools in the world. But he was stressing out about it, and we happened to be a part of a rather large community group that met in our home. And we were meeting with them, and we were asking them, we said, how many of you guys are actually doing what you went to school for in college or what you thought you'd be doing at 18? 3 out of 20-something. We know this in our mind logically, but we get so fixed. And then we start to tell God how to make plans. And there's a distinct difference in living our life with inviting God into our plans versus asking to be a part of God's plan. God is not waiting to be invited into your plan. He wants to invite you into his. But we get just kind of like on this path, and it's got to be this thing, or if the map doesn't seem to make sense, we get really thrown off, we get really frustrated. But your purpose isn't singular. It isn't fixed. There's more in Jeremiah 29 I want us to look at. Before we read about all the plans and everything that God's got planned for us, we see Jeremiah remind his audience of something. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons and your daughters, so that they too may have sons and daughters, increase, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Now again, there's some context here in terms of Jeremiah's audience. Jeremiah is writing a letter to a specific group of people set in a specific time. But I think there's something in here for us, because I think what Jeremiah is reminding his audience of, he's saying, hey, like you are where you are. God says this is where you are. It says, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Now I realize this part of our conversation can spawn about a million other questions, but God has brought Israel here. Ancient Israel is exiled. They are scattered. They are dispersed. They are not where they want to be. In fact, they're not even allowed to go back to their land. And most of them are under foreign authority. They are carried into exile by God. And of course, they're frustrated. But I think sometimes we've been in this season and we don't realize it. I would imagine, I don't want to go with percentages, but lots of us have probably had to work for someone we didn't respect for a season. Lots of us have probably just checking boxes and going through the motions. And we've been frustrated, and we have felt isolated. We have felt exiled. We have wondered, where are you, God, in this? What is the purpose in this season? What is the purpose in this job? What is the purpose in this moment? Why have you brought me here? I feel exiled. This isn't easy. It's not where I want to be. And I think that what we do in our mind is go, well, then if it's not where I want to be and it's not easy, then I must not be on my purpose. And I don't think that's right necessarily. Now, I think sometimes that is an indicator that you need a shift. That for sure can happen. But I think that needs to come with a conversation with God, because all too often we do this thing where we think, hey, if life is easy and good, then I am on point. As opposed to if life is not good, then I must be missing something or doing something wrong. Which has got some irony to it. You know, in a Christian context, we often reference a thing called the Passion of Christ, which is just referencing the last few days of the life of Jesus. Jesus would be the ultimate example of being on point, of being someone who knew their purpose from beginning to end and walked it out, right? And the word passion means suffering or enduring. Your purpose won't just be one thing, possibly. It might ebb and flow, it might change, and it also won't always be easy. In fact, I think I can make a case that if you're actually on your purpose, on your path, things might actually be tough from time to time. Part of the other reasons I think that we struggle with purpose is we've kind of tangled it up with our concept of work. We think purpose has to be what I do for a job. Purpose must be my career. And I totally get where we get that from. And for some people, it will be. It will actually be like you are absolutely satisfied and you feel like you are in lock sync. But for others, it's not necessarily, it's not attached to a title or a salary or a role. Our purpose is bigger than that. It's broad. It comes in our relationships. It comes in our hobbies. It comes in our passions and our interests and our creativity. It is bigger than just what you do for a job. What would it look like to actually spend less time about where do I need to work and what do I need to do, and more about how am I going to show up and why am I working? A couple years ago, I got to sit down with the then president of UFCU here in Austin, of the University Credit Union. His name was Tony Badette. He's a Longhorn, but I talked to him anyway. It was difficult. But Tony shared with me so many of his leadership lessons, and so many of those things stuck. But one of the things he shared with me, I said, hey, Tony, what is the number one thing? You have been with this credit union for, 38 years he was there. He managed $5 billion in assets, had over 350,000 clients. I said, what's the number one thing you did as a leader? He said, the best thing I ever did for anybody was help them find their why. I said, what do you mean? He said, if you got a job at UFCU while Tony was president, you most likely sat down with him. That was from executives to tellers to janitors. You actually went to Tony's office, and he would ask you a question. He would say, why do you go to work every day? And as you thought of your answer, he would share his. He would share about his wife and his 2 daughters, nothing to do with banking or math. That's also why I like Tony. He would share that my purpose has nothing to do with my actual job. Because he would say, when you know the why you are showing up, it makes actually showing up for work very different. I think oftentimes we get our purpose tangled up in what we're doing to pay our bills. You may actually work where you work just because you like who you work with, not necessarily about the product, or maybe you actually take a lower pay because you're really passionate about the product or the service that you create, or maybe you work simply so that your spouse can stay home with your kids. There's a lot of purpose in all of that. Your purpose may not have anything to do with what you actually do to get a paycheck. I think we get those tangled up. I want to keep reading in Jeremiah, though, or go back to the passage that we just looked at. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. So we have seasons of exile. We know that our purpose may not always be easy. It may not be wrapped up in what we do, and it may not be singular. But I think all too often we get wrapped up in this purpose conversation because we play this, what I call it, the when or the if-then game. When I find that person, then. When I figure out that career path, then. When I land that promotion, then. When I get that job, when I find that stuff, when I buy that house, then. And I think what Jeremiah offers us is an opportunity to let God remind us that your purpose isn't always somewhere over there when or if. That most likely your purpose is right in front of you, where God has carried you, by the way. You are where you are. It's the only place you can actually be. So what if you got a little more serious about paying attention to what's in front of you? Because God has carried you there. Your purpose isn't necessarily out there somewhere. It doesn't mean that there's something on the horizon. It doesn't mean there's something later. It could be right now in front of you. Your purpose will always be out there, outside of where you are right now. And if that's true, if your purpose isn't always out there somewhere and you're still feeling like frustrated, I wonder if part of the goal is actually just to be where you are better. In fact, I think we're always kind of wanting a more, and what's funny is if you can't be where you are well, why would God, a boss, a manager, or a parent give you more? You are where you are. Decide who you want to be. Focus on why you're there even more than where you are. And then note this, I love that Jeremiah points this out. God says, if you seek the prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile, pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you will prosper. God's saying if you actually focus on where you are and doing that well and show up in real and healthy and vibrant ways, watch what I will do, not only to where you are, but for you. If where I have carried you, if you seek for that space to prosper, you will prosper too. But we think it's got to be somewhere else. We think it can't be where I am because it's too tough, or it doesn't feel finite and affixed enough. We just get it all tangled up. The other thing I think that we do is we have this idea that our purpose has to be big or grand or epic. It has to be public. I've got to write that next book, or I've got to be on that next big podcast. With those same 20-somethings that we worked with a while back, we would notice, Sal and I would sit with them, and we would notice this desire to change the world. And I loved that. And many of them did some crazy, awesome things. But we kind of noticed this thing that I kind of ended up labeling as glamorous Christianity. It's this idea that to be on point, to be on your path, on your Christian faith, that you've got to do something kind of epic, big, grand, have some new theological idea that no one's thought of, or write this thing, or transform this major social injustice. All of these things are really good things. I'm not saying they're bad. But we notice that the people that craved that kind of purpose, more so than others, had this interesting dynamic where they wanted to change the world, but they couldn't pay their cell phone bill. They wanted to conquer these massive things, which are beautiful things, but they could not manage their relationships or their responsibilities. I think that's not uncommon, that we crave this big thing, this grand, epic journey. I think that there's actually something in us to want that sometimes. But when we do that, but we can't manage the people that are right in front of our face, I think we might be off our purpose. Your purpose isn't out there somewhere else. Your purpose might be exactly where you go to this afternoon when you go home. It might be exactly where you show up tomorrow morning. But we need it to be big, glamorous. It's funny, someone who actually ended up being kind of a big, glamorous Christian, not by any asking of herself, is Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa lived in Calcutta and served and worked with the poor and the marginalized. And she wrote books about her, documentaries, tons of movies. She inspired tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. She never sought that, but she ended up doing that. But people would go to her. They would actually go to Calcutta to visit where she worked, and they would ask her, help me find my purpose. And then a lot of them would say, can I move here with you? Can I do what you're doing? Can I serve the poor here? And she would give this response almost every time. Love begins at home. Find your own Calcutta. Find the sick, the suffering, and the lonely right where you are. Your purpose probably isn't out there. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a time for a change or that you should initiate a shift in your life. I'm just saying, like, if you're doing that because you're trying to get out of where you are, but you can't be where you are well, maybe God's trying to talk to you about where you are right now. And the reason I think that is actually, as we continue reading in Jeremiah, I want to go back to verse 11, but I want to keep reading this time. So verse 11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me. You'll see the next step when you seek me with all your heart. If we can consider that our purpose isn't necessarily affixed, it's not one singular perfect path that you can't vary from. If we know it might not always be easy, if it might not even be tangled up in what we do, if it might not be epic and glamorous or public, so what do we do with all that? I think Jeremiah gives us the answer. God says, you'll seek me. You'll find me. You'll find the next step. It'll be obvious. Those doors will open when you actually seek me, when you start here. It starts here. Now, I think the reason we just stop at verse 11 most of the time is I think it fits better on merch. That's one reason. But two, I think that second part is actually more intimidating. I think there's something that makes us a little uncomfortable. I am so good at telling God my plans. I actually make plans for the Lord. And then I tell the Lord what he should do with you. I mean, I'm just really good at this. But you know what I'm not always good at? Is getting still and letting God have a conversation with me about what's going on in my heart. About what's actually happening inside my heart right now with the people that I do life with every day. That's a little more intimidating. It's much easier just to rattle off the things I'd like to see happen and to dream about what needs to be next than it is to actually allow God to have my heart, which is actually all that he wants. He doesn't need notoriety, even with his name attached to it. He doesn't care if you're popular. He doesn't care about your paycheck. He doesn't care about your portfolio. He just wants your heart. That's the whole reason you were created, like Buck talked about last week, just so he could have your heart. But we'll skip that process and we'll just wait for God to deliver our purpose. And we want the big thing. And we want it also to hit like lightning. Like it needs to be clear. It needs to hit us like a lightning bolt. Like, oh, that was the thing I was supposed to do forever with the rest of my life. And that's not usually how purpose works. Purpose isn't loud. It's not usually necessarily obvious. It's not linear. It comes through these like small things. It comes from these trials. It comes from these conversations. It comes from meaningful community. All the things that shape our heart is how we discover our purpose. It's funny because we love God in all the unexpected ways. Like we love it. You hear all these stories all the time of like, I didn't expect to have this job or that opportunity. I didn't expect that phone call. I didn't expect to meet this person at this time. And we love those stories. We make movies about those stories. And we're like, look at what God did unexpectedly. But then we go, but in my life, I would like to tell you how to operate in expected ways. God is longing just to participate with us. He just wants our heart. In 2019, my family relocated from Nashville here to Austin. And I had said when we moved, I had worked for churches for almost 20 years. And so I said that I was retiring. Clearly did not work. But I said I was done. And I told the boys, I said, hey, you've always had to go to church wherever I worked, so you can pick the church. And so we did a bunch of church shopping, lots of great churches in town. But the boys got connected here at North Point. And they got involved in small groups, started serving, and they were thriving, and it wasn't half bad. So Sal and I decided we could stay. Buck and Jordan were okay, but just kidding. They were great. We enjoyed it too, so we got connected as well a little bit. But I was really glad to take a break from church work, and then I just kind of felt empty. I felt really isolated. I felt like I was in exile for a season. I felt like no one knew me and I didn't know anybody. So I decided it was time to, maybe, okay, Jen, you need to get connected a little bit. You need to get involved. For 2 years, I tried to get involved here at North Point. I sent emails. I filled out little postcard thingies for 2 years. They say it's because I use Hotmail. Could be, that's fine. There was, toward the end of that couple of years, there was a Sunday where we did like a QR code on the screen and you could get your phone out and you could fill out a form to start volunteering. I was like, this is my moment. I checked every box on that form. I was like, I will make coffee. I will hand out Starbursts. I will do the lights. I will help with the slides. They won't let me touch the lights, by the way. I'll be involved in music. I marked everything, students, small groups, whatever you need, except children's ministry. Because 4-year-olds don't like my sarcasm. And that was just going to be a lose-lose. The only person that called me about volunteering was Jill in our children's ministry. Sal and the boys got involved and started serving in Upstreet, but I didn't. So I sat by myself in here for a season, and it was a weird season. It was strange. I had come from our church in Tennessee where I knew everybody and knew everything to a place where I'm in Cedar Park and I know no one. And no one really knows me. And I felt so exiled and so isolated. And one day, there was a crisis with a family that we were close to in Tennessee happened, and they called and told me about the stuff that was going on. And what could I do? I was here. I couldn't do anything. And that broke me. I couldn't bring a meal or go sit with their kids or go up to the hospital and be with them. I could offer absolutely nothing. And for some reason, that moment was the moment that did it to me. So I started to cry. And I'm not talking like a gentle weeping. I ugly cried. And I ugly cried all over the house. I started on the couch. Then I moved to the bathroom and cried. Then I moved to the floor in my closet and cried. Side note, Sal and the boys were home. I'm sure they were like, what is she doing? I just cried all around them. I moved around the house crying. Finally, I had a conversation with God about it. And I was like, I am trying. I thought you brought us here on purpose. But here, I don't even matter. At least if we were back in Tennessee, I could make some food. No one really wants that. I could buy some food. I could help with the kids. I could sit with someone. I would matter if I lived there. But here, I don't matter. And I felt like God said, I'm just trying to show you that you matter. Without your role, without your title, without what you do for anybody else, just you and me, you matter, period. I actually, it's funny because someone after first service was like, I hope people don't think we'll actually ignore all the Hotmail emails that come in. And I'm like, no, I actually think God intentionally put me in a season of isolation and exile for a minute. Because that was the only way he was going to get my heart. I could have just easily stepped back into a space where I was comfortable and done all the things that I'd always done. But God wanted to do something with me and have a conversation with me. And it's funny because it was a lightning bolt moment for me. But it wasn't one that lit up some clear and perfect path. It was one that lit up my heart. And I had gotten my heart all tangled up in what I do and how I show up for others. And that had become my purpose for a long time. And God was like, I just want to have a conversation with you. I just want to be with you. It's the whole reason I made you. But we get it all tangled up. Now this week, I spent a lot of time looking at Jeremiah thinking about how what purpose is not. I promise Jordan's going to come in next week. And he's going to talk a lot about how you do distinguish and determine where purpose is possibly leading you. But I do want us to consider a couple of things as we head into next week. If you're someone who needs to either discover or rediscover your purpose, what do? Well, I think it has a lot to do with our conversation so far. You just untangle your concept of purpose for a minute. Where have you gotten off on the way that you see this? When you're asking yourself, what's the next big thing? How is that tangled up in some stuff? Is that what's the next big thing so I can avoid actually paying attention to what's in front of me? Or maybe you're like tangled up in comparison. You're comparing your purpose to someone else, so you've done some bad math because their purpose seems a little more glamorous, so that means yours is less meaningful. Have you got purpose tangled up in what you do for a living? And you've ignored what your passions, your hobbies, your interests, even your struggles might be and what that offers toward your purpose? Detangle your purpose. And if you spend some time kind of thinking through that, then I want you to try something else. I want you to ask yourself. Jeremiah says, you will seek me and you will find me. You'll know the open doors and you'll know the closed ones when you seek me with your heart. Are you even inviting God to participate in your conversations you're having right now about your next steps or your plans? Are you operating on your plan? Or are you operating on inviting, are you trying to invite God into what you've already planned, or are you trying to get on his plan? God's inviting you into his plan. He just wants to participate with you. So ask yourself, am I even participating with God in any of this? Or am I just on my own? On my own out of desire to control, on my own out of fear, on my own because I'm clinging too tight to a past purpose? Am I even letting God participate in this conversation with me? And then, after you invite God into that conversation, what about you do just to ask God, every morning maybe? What if you wake up tomorrow morning and you start this conversation about your next step, your path, your plan with God, and you ask, God, show me what you want me to see. Help me to be who you created me to be. Help me to be that at home. Help me to be that with my parents. Help me to be that with my spouse. Help me to be that with my kids. And then help me to be that with my coworkers. Help me to be that when I go to HEB. Help me to be that every moment of the day. Show me what you want me to see. I don't want to be on my plan. I want to be on your plan. And then be patient and listen. Get still long enough just to hear from him. Because I do believe, guys, that we are made on purpose. There is a plan for a purpose, most likely for something that many of us cannot see right now. But the only way we're going to find that is if we get still and we seek him with our whole heart. I'm going to pray for us. Father, I thank you that you have created us on purpose for a purpose. But Lord, we confess to you that sometimes that gets confusing. It gets bogged down maybe in what we do or bogged down in our frustrations because it's not always easy. There's so many things we put ahead of our heart in you. Help us to just detangle some of that, to invite you into some conversations about our jobs, about our marriages, about our families, about our next steps, whatever that looks like. Help us to just participate with you in the ebbs and flows of life. We want to be on your plan. Help us to see it. Give us clarity. Give us wisdom. We thank you that you offer to walk with us. We thank you that you know the plans that you have for us. Help us to trust you with our heart in all that. In Jesus' name we ask this. Amen. Thank you guys so much. Part 3 next week.